The cardiologist comes back in. He sat down on the bed beside my husband and he said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis, but they have looked at your blood work from the weekend. It looks like leukemia." And I won't ever forget, and I'm so thankful for the first moments after that, the things that my husband said that really set the tone for our journey. I sat down and he looked at me and he said, "Joy, we will not get angry at God." And I'm so grateful that those were his first words out of all the things he could have said. The second thing he did, we were not in a private room. We were just waiting on our heart cath. So we were in a shared room. There was a man in the bed next to him. And of course the curtain was pulled, but they had talked a little bit throughout the day. My husband talked to everybody. He was very friendly.
Yeah.
And the second thing he did was pulled back that curtain just enough to see that man's face. He knew that man had heard everything. The diagnosis, all of it. And he looked at him and he said, "What about you? What if you had just gotten the diagnosis that I just got? Do you know you're on your way to heaven?" That focus and that priority in that moment, it was incredible.
Hey, welcome into the Able to Overcome podcast. This is episode number 5. But due to some technical difficulties, we missed the first 5 minutes of the episode with Miss Joy. And in these 5 minutes, she describes how her and her husband, up until this point, had been married for 25 years. They had also invested over 2 decades into ministry. And then they get this diagnosis of leukemia. Miss Joy is going to walk us through this diagnosis, the loss of her husband, and really how God has been with her through this journey of grief. And she's going to give us tangible ways she's been able to overcome it or walk through the grief. Hey, I'm excited for this episode, excited that you joined us, and without wasting any more of your time, let's hop into the episode.
We had been there all weekend in ER, and it was Monday morning, and the doctor came in and said that he was going to have a heart cath and we would probably go home. They didn't see anything alarming in any of his tests, and so we'd do the heart cath and then just go from there. So I'm starting to pack up the room, thinking we're going home. And about 10 minutes later, the cardiologist comes back in and he sat down on the bed beside my husband and he said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis, but they have looked at your blood work from the weekend a little bit. They've looked at it a little bit closer, and it looks like leukemia." And I just remember we both froze. I was putting some stuff up on a shelf, and I remember that. I had my arms up above my head, and I just froze. Stunned. Not leukemia. We're not here for leukemia. We're on the cardiac floor. Where did this come from?
Yeah.
There must be some mistake. That's what I'm thinking. And he said, oncology's going to come in and talk to you and all of that. And we learned that day that there was only a 40% chance that he would be alive in 5 years. So we knew what we were looking at. And I'll never forget those first moments. Total shock. With one word, your whole life changes.
Everything changes.
Everything. And what do you say? What? You have no words. And I won't ever forget, and I'm so thankful for the first moments after that, the things that my husband said that really set the tone for our journey. And I went over and I sat on the bed. I didn't know what to say. I knew I needed to be near him and try to comfort him, but I had no words. And I sat down and he looked at me and he said, "Joy, we will not get angry at God." And I'm so grateful that those were his first words. Out of all the things he could have said, those were his first words, and they helped me that day. They helped me today.
Yeah.
They continue to help me and my kids to be submissive to what God's plan is. This didn't surprise God. It didn't sneak up on him.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of the plan. And so I was very thankful that he said that, and he kind of just from the very beginning set that tone. The second thing he did, we were not in a private room. We were just waiting on our heart cath. So we were in a shared room. There was a man in the bed next to him. Of course, the curtain was pulled, but they had talked a little bit throughout the day. My husband talked to everybody. He was very friendly.
Yeah.
And the second thing he did was pulled back that curtain just enough to see that man's face. He knew that man had heard everything. The diagnosis, you know, all of it. And he looked at him and he said, "What about you? What if you had just gotten the diagnosis that I just got? Do you know you're on your way to heaven?" And the man said he did, and he shared his testimony, and so we were grateful for that. But that focus and that priority in that moment, it was incredible. And it helps our family even now today.
Yeah.
Very simple focus. Stay submissive to God. Don't get angry. Don't get bitter.
The mission hasn't changed.
And yeah, we're supposed to be reaching people.
It blows my mind, because you can only find that kind of response with the power of God living inside.
Right.
Like, that is so an unearthly response.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
not only to him, to me, we're not going to blame God, but I'm not going to blame him, but I'm just going to continue. Literally, in this moment, I'm going to continue the mission. I'm not going to blame him, and I'm going to be for him.
Yeah.
Like, so that tells me I didn't get to meet your husband. After just hearing about it, I wish I would have. But his faith wasn't circumstantial. Something in him had been given. He had died to self a long time ago.
Yeah.
So when death gets brought on the table, for him, it's like,
Yeah.
what's changed?
Yep. He
It's
was
so beautiful. What a man.
He was very genuine. He was the most genuine Christian I've ever known. And he would always tell me all through the years, long before this, he would say, "Joy, we need to be walking so closely with the Lord." He said, someday, some trial, some tragedy, something's going to happen. It's inevitable for all of us. We had no idea it would be leukemia at age 47, you know, but he would say, "Joy, someday something's going to happen that's going to shake us to the very core. And we need to already be walking so closely with the Lord that we're there. We're already there." And I just remember him telling me that so many times. And yeah, it was incredible to have a husband like that, to see him pastor, to just, I was so privileged to be married to him.
So how, I guess with y'all walking so closely to the Lord already, not much would have changed, but I'll still ask the question, how did that change the way in which y'all's relationship operated from the moment of the diagnosis to that, as that journey continued?
Well, I think he was a very strong leader, and so I was very like dependent on him, and like, you know, followed his leadership. I was so good with like, you make the decisions, I'll help you, I'll follow, you know. When he became so sick, I really had to pick up a lot of things and not take leadership necessarily, but just all of a sudden he's so dependent on me in a way that we never imagined, you know. So I think that was probably the biggest change
And
there.
how did you how did you handle that as your bit? Because not only are you trying to comfort him, but you are needing comfort.
Yeah. And the kids, you've got your kids. How do you tell your kids? I mean, that was brutal. Telling the kids multiple times that, because the cancer came back and came back a third time. And,
Wow.
so yeah, I don't know. I think it's just you got to survive. You're just surviving. Like you have to, there's certain things you have to do. You don't have any choice. But the strength you find in the Lord when you have absolutely nothing left, because I don't think I'd ever been at that point before all this.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I've been tired and I've been frustrated or like weary or whatever, but never like I got nothing. But I got to the point with all this that I'm like, I got nothing. Physically, spiritually, mentally, like you just feel like you're just drained. And I can't explain it, but I can tell you that when God is all you have, He's enough.
Yeah.
And He helps you. He just helps you do what you need to do. Oh,
So beautiful. Thank you for that. So as the diagnosis was given and y'all begin to battle and it goes away and it comes back, and I guess towards the end, if you want to just walk us through that. And
yeah. So he that scenario that I just shared started a 7-week hospital stay and really intense chemo. The treatment plan for what he had is like a 3.5-year plan. I mean, it's very intense, but
the journeys.
the greater part of it in the beginning is to try to get them in remission, which he did go into remission within about a month.
Wow.
So we had 19 months in remission, but all the while still doing chemo. Still, I mean, it was not just, oh, we're in remission, life is normal. Like, it wasn't like that at all. He still pastored. He preached. He had to sit and preach. He didn't have the strength to stand and preach. But he pastored when he was in the hospital. He would set up a little office in there and pastored from the hospital. And I would hear him on the phone dealing with stuff and encouraging people. And he couldn't make visits, but he could call people. And so he's still very much
still like caring and loving for people.
Yeah, like he never stopped pastoring ever till the very end. And
I know for any preacher to have to preach sitting down, and he got through that.
yeah
That's
yeah
he sounds like a very passionate preacher from what you've said.
Yes. Yep. So 19 months of remission, and then it came back in September of 2019. Okay. Came back, and so at that point, the next step was a bone marrow transplant. So in January of 2020, we went to Nashville for 3 months. Big, long process. It's, again, brutal. It's awful. Like, watching him go through that was so hard. He went through the transplant fine. The transplant itself takes you to the edge of death. Like, it takes you to death's door.
Really?
It's so dangerous because they wipe out your immune system completely. And, so we came through that. We had to stay in Nashville supposed to stay for 100 days. I think they let us go on day 82 or 83 or something because he was doing so good. Came home. We were home 10 days, and he got a fever. This was the end of April. mid-April. He got a fever. Well, when you have leukemia and you get a fever, it's very alarming what's going on, you know. And sure enough, it was back again. Just 10 days after coming home from the transplant. So we're thinking he's healed once again. For the second time, we're thinking he's healed.
It's over.
Everything was clear. He was in remission again. And then it comes back with a fury, so fast and furious. And so he was admitted to Huntsville Hospital. At this point, it's COVID. COVID is going on. So I can't be with him. So that was another, you know, he was already terrible about being by himself. He was not good at being alone in general. But then you add all this, you know, and yeah, couldn't be with him that whole time when he was up there.
So no visits at all? Like they
finally called me. He was struggling so much with being alone. They finally called me about a week into it and said, you can come up. We need you to come up for like an hour. Just
good.
So 2 times in 12 days, I was able to come up 2 times for an hour. It was brutal. It was like, I can't even explain it. I would go. I knew where his window was. I knew the 7th floor very well. And I would go be down on the street and parked in the parking lot over there and just look up at that window and pray and send notes up to him. You know, I have the very last little note I sent up to him. I carry it in my Bible. And it has some kind of little liquid stain on it. And I don't know if it was a tear.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I always tell people, you know, in marriage, and I know we're talking about grief here, but I want to just hit this. I always tell them in marriage, don't take for granted those little things. Send the notes.
Yeah.
Take the time, do the little things. Because when that's all you have left, you know, it's
means so much.
So, so the next thing was a clinical trial. That's all we had left.
So he was able to come home from the hospital at that point.
He came home, very weak, very dangerous because his immune system was not good. So they put him in a clinical trial. Some kind of, I forget what it was called now, but where they harvest the white blood cells and send them somewhere over in Europe and engineer them and send them back, engineer them to try to fight cancer cells.
Yeah. And
then put them back in your body. Yeah. And the hope is that they'll destroy the cancer cells. And so that was really our last hope as far as medically, like trying something to try. They were hopeful that it would work. So in June, this fast forward, we're in June, and it was Wednesday, June the 17th, I guess it would have been. We were in Nashville and they harvested the cells. He was doing good. He was making jokes pulling pranks on the nurse, and he was being his normal self.
Yeah.
He was weak, but he's doing pretty good.
Personality still shining through.
And they harvested the cells. They got them all packaged. They shipped them. They got them off in the mail. And the doctor on Thursday said, there's really no reason for you to stay here. it was like almost a 30-day process to get them back. So he said, I'm going to let you go home, and I'm going to, we'll do the things you need to do in Huntsville. He had to get blood like every other day and chemo, all the things. He said, we can do that in Huntsville so you can be home for the next little bit. So we came home on Thursday, and we were home. We, went to the doctor, got the blood, different things for Friday and Saturday that he needed. And then Saturday night, it was the night before Father's Day. He was very weak, but he was sitting in his recliner in the living room. We had a conversation. Some of the kids were there. He was very weak, but that was not abnormal.
Yeah.
Like, he had been weak for 2.5 years. So that wasn't abnormal. And he said, it was time to go to bed. And so I always helped him, get in there and give him all his medicines and all that. I was his nurse.
Yeah.
And so he got in bed. Nothing seemed off as far as, different than what we had been dealing with. And I'll never forget, I gave him his medicine, and he was very weak. And he had no platelets. So one little fall or anything, and he could bleed to death. So I said to him, I've regretted that my last words were not, I love you. But my last words were words of love and concern. I said to him, don't try to get up without help. Because I knew him, and he's stubborn, and he was going to, I was afraid he'd try to get up and he'd fall and he'd, whatever. I said, don't try to get up without help. And he said, okay. And went to bed, went to sleep. Woke up at about 5:45. It was Father's Day morning. I had put a meal in the crock pot the night before, so I went in there to check that and stuff, and came back to bed. And I looked at him, and I noticed he didn't have he wore a CPAP machine. He didn't have it on, and he just had a different look. And he was already in heaven at that point. And, total shock. I mean, even though he was so sick, we weren't expecting that. Yeah. So the Lord called him home Father's Day morning. 2020. And, as hard as that is for us, what a beautiful thought for him.
Yeah.
To get to go be with his Heavenly Father on Father's Day morning. He was always go big or go home. So I'm like, okay, even in this, you were go big or go home.
Wow, what a beautiful thought.
Yeah. So
what a hard thought, but a beautiful.
But another part I like to share. I said, don't get up without help. And over our bed hangs a sign or artwork that's, in the morning when I rise, give me Jesus.
Yeah.
That had hung over our bed for years. Still there. It will always hang over my bed.
Yeah.
And, in the months to follow, I had guilt. I should have done something different. I should have known he was struggling. I should have this, should have that. You can't do that. You can't beat yourself up. And I didn't tell him I didn't say I love you. But I really did.
Yeah.
In my own way, But the beautiful thought in that was he didn't get up without help. Yeah. He had help, the best help, imaginable. So just so many things that the Lord allowed to happen, things to be said that just help us even now today.
Comfort us as you go.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful, Joy. Yeah. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. But man, your husband is he's doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so comforting. So
Yeah.
as you navigated that guilt and the grief, what were because so many people have lost someone, and not every situation is unique, but I can imagine that guilt, that questioning, what could I have done, what could I have changed, I can't even imagine all the bad thoughts the enemy sent your way during this time. And so if you could just walk us through those months following you losing your husband, and what you did to help overcome those things.
Well, I did struggle with, I should have called 911. I should have known he was struggling. I should have this, should have that, all the things. I had been the perfect nurse up until this was the thought that came into my mind.
Yeah.
I had done everything right until the moment he needed me the most, and then I failed him. And that's just a lie.
Yeah.
And the thought the Lord put in my mind was, oh, so you think you could have been in control?
Yeah.
You think are you that prideful that you think you were the one keeping him alive?
Yeah.
It was time. It was God ordained. It was planned all along. I remember sitting in the truck with my brother, and in one of my really low moments, and saying, it's not supposed to be this way. Just in my raw, transparent.
Like Psalm of David.
It's not
just
supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
And my brother looked at me and he said, very lovingly, nicest guy you'll ever meet, but he looked at me and he said, who said it's not supposed to be this way? And, it's just a point of complete surrender. This is what God chose. I don't know why. I have to believe that somehow God can get greater glory out of my husband going on to heaven than had he stayed here and continued to pastor and all of that. Yeah. And so the Lord had to really kind of almost like, he had to kind of smite my heart. Like, who do you think you are that you could have, if you had acted differently, he'd still be alive? No.
We have to come to grips with the real true fact that we are no more in control of our next breath than anything.
Absolutely. Yep.
But it's tough reconciling that with things that hurt us.
It is. It wasn't immediate. I did struggle with that, for a while. So.
And how, with navigating, that grief and the grief of your kids, how did you help them walk through that as you're walking through it?
I think I tried to help them come to the same foundational truths and reminders that I had to come to myself. We all had to come back to the very basics of what we believe about the Bible, about who God is. It's either true or it's not. God's either good or he's not. He's sovereign or he's not. He has a plan or he doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't make mistakes or he does.
Yeah.
I can trust him or I can't. There's no middle ground. I either believe this or I don't. And if I believe it, it changes me. It changes how I handle the hardest thing I've ever gone through. If I believe what I've always said I believed.
Yeah.
And if I believe, God to be who I've always believed he was and who the Bible says he is. Yeah. So it takes you down to it just strips you down to the very bare basics of what you believe and why you believe it and do you believe it.
And I feel like trials give us the opportunity to live out our faith. What faith do you have to have when you're sitting on top of
Exactly.
the mountaintop and you've got everything given to you that you need?
Exactly.
But when you are stripped away of everything and you really have to, the choice is set before you, run from God or run to Him.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity to say, well,
Yeah.
I'm thankful that I'm just sitting here hearing you talk, and like this is the kind of faith that you hear the Apostle Paul in prison. This is the kind of the faith you see in Peter at the end of his life. When they're all getting martyred, it seems like they're losing, and they got to say, do I trust God or not?
Yeah.
To the end, to the bitter end.
Yeah,
And Paul had no clue what his ministry was going to do. All he could see is the fact that he's in prison for years and he's about to die.
Right.
And yet, to the very end, he's following. And
yeah, and you have thoughts like, Lord, all I ever want to do is serve you. All he ever wanted to do is serve you. Like, it really, I would say, it brings you down to rock bottom, where you have to, it's a choice. It's a choice. Just like you choose to love somebody when you don't feel like it.
yes,
It's a choice to believe God is who He says He is. The Bible is true. I can trust Him. He knew this was going to happen. It's part of His plan. His plan for my husband was, as far as his life on this earth, was over on June 21st, 2020. But his plan for me wasn't. And his plan for my kids wasn't. And so I tried to help them see that. Like, God, yes, this hurts, but God has given you this opportunity. What are you going to do with it?
what are you going to do with this pain? What are you going to do with it?
In my husband's second to last sermon, 2 weeks before he died, he made the statement, when your pain has a purpose, you can actually have the joy of the Lord. And it's been amazing. As our family has walked through this, we have the most warped sense of humor, and there's a lot of laughter and joy in our family. And that has come from the Lord. And I think it's because God has allowed us to do those things that my husband said in those first moments, and it's not always been easy. We've all wanted to quit along the way. So I don't want to make it sound like,
it's just been the
but by God's grace, He picks us back up and, helps us keep going.
how walking in the months and the years after, how long has it been since your husband has passed?
It's 4.5 years now. Yeah.
Has the way in which you feel the grief or the absence of him, has that shifted? Has more peace come through time? And I guess asking, with you seeing the fruit of your life, and we can get into that and what you're doing, has that helped at all see God's greater hand in your life, in spite of something so tragic happening?
Yeah. Grief is different for everyone, and I don't believe it's ever over. I don't think you're ever done grieving.
Yeah.
But I do think it changes as you take steps to help yourself and help others. And immersing myself in ministry still, because when he passed away, it was like, okay, so all of a sudden, in a moment, I'm not a pastor's wife anymore. Our family's not a pastor's family anymore. What do I do? I wasn't a pastor's wife because I wasn't in ministry because I happened to marry a pastor. I felt called to ministry as a teenager. So it was like, Lord, what do I do now? And I remember I went from 4.5 years ago thinking, Lord, what do I do now? To today, Lord, how am I going to do all this?
Yeah.
And it's such a blessing, because that is where you find healing, in trying to help other people. And and serving the Lord and using your time for something instead of sitting at home and, you want to just stay at home in a fetal position and cry and not face anything. And there might be moments for that, but we can't stay there.
Yeah. That's so powerful. Because I really do think people struggle with grief because they lose they lose their purpose. And for you, your husband may have been part of your purpose, but he wasn't your purpose. Like, you were advancing the kingdom of God. You were Team Jesus. You had something outside of your relationship and even your kids that was pushing you on. But it's when you lose that the only thing that your eyes are set on, that you cannot have a vision for the future, right? But the gospel gives us a purpose beyond circumstance.
Absolutely.
So it's like so separate from all the blessings, and that's what a husband and a wife is. That's what kids are.
Yeah.
But I think that's the only way to move through grief. Because I don't know if you ever escape it, but you can move through it with a God-given or a kingdom-driven focus.
Yeah, it's always there. Like, I mean, as far as there's not a day that goes by something doesn't happen that, like, a song, or especially with me working at a church, like, because he was pastor, I was pastor's wife, like, every day there's something. It's just like, sounds like a dagger. Like, man, I miss him. Man, I wish we could still be serving together, So I don't know that it gets easier in that way, because the void is just huge.
Yeah.
But God's grace is huge, and it matches that. It meets that. And so yeah, I mean, I will always, it's like half of you is gone, because that's really what happens when you lose your spouse. You're one, and so half of you is gone. So I still find myself thinking, like, what would he do in this situation? Yeah. What would he want me to do? What, and he would say, serve the Lord, stay faithful, help encourage the kids to do the same. And, so I'm a single parent now, but trying to, like, do the things that I know,
I'm just thankful that y'all had such a unique relationship where he passes away and you know what he would want. Like, you operated in such a way when he was living that you did things as a team.
Yeah.
And you talked about it, and it was thoughtful, and you had a vision for your family.
Yeah.
And so when he did pass away, that vision was still there.
Right.
And
none of that changed. It just didn't, And I joke all the time about stuff with my kids, like, I better not mess. So when he passed away, the youngest two were 13 and 15. And I've said, man, I better not mess them up, because when I get to heaven, he'll get on to me. But no, I try to do with the kids, like, how would he want them? In what areas do I need to push them the way he would have? In what areas do I need to comfort them the way he would have? And, like, I can never be him. Yeah. But I very much try to still do all the things the way we always did.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
So for the person, again, this podcast exists. And so thank you so much for sharing, because I really do believe that we can only grow and develop and overcome through the power of testimonies by looking toward the great crowd of witnesses, to look into Christians who have overcome certain battles. So that's the whole point of this, is that people would look at your story and then have hope for their own. And so for the person that may have just lost their spouse, their best friend, what would the advice you would give them about overcoming grief or walking through grief, to not lose? What would you tell them to help them not lose hope in the battle?
First of all, not knowing, who we'd be talking about.
Yeah.
My first thing would be, like, making sure they know the Lord.
Yeah.
Obviously. But for a believer, I've already mentioned, and this was so foundational. The reason I bring it up again is because it's played such a huge part in my journey. Going back to those simple truths. that you either believe or you don't. You know, who God is, what I believe. Staying in his word. Prayer. I always was in his word and I always prayed before, but the level it went to after my husband's passing was so much deeper. Literally, like God was, you know, like, I mean, he is right beside us, but like I could feel that. Like I needed him so desperately in every moment, sometimes to just even get out of bed, you know. Fill your mind with, you know, positive things as far as like Christian music, as far as listening to, you know, preaching, listening to encouraging things, listening, you know, filling your mind with the right things. Silence is not good. It wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that helped me was learning to be grateful for the 28 years we had. A lot of people don't get that many.
Yeah.
And when your heart is grateful, it changes you. Like it just does something about your whole demeanor. It helps your mind. When you're in a grateful spirit, it helps you. And
I think science would back that up. That the more grateful or gratitude you show, your immune system actually does better. Your overall health increases.
Mm.
And so it's crazy how God wired the body to work. And I think that's why it says set our minds on things that are above.
Mm-hmm.
Ponder the beautiful things.
Yeah. Yep. I think about the verse, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. Not for everything.
Yeah.
I'll never be thankful for cancer, like, you know, but in the cancer, in the loss of my husband, in all of this, I can still find a reason to be thankful, because for 28 years, I was so blessed to have him, you know? And so that has really helped me not allowing yourself to kind of hibernate is very important. You want to just hide. You want to just crawl in a hole. And even when I came here to this church, I sat up in the balcony the first Sunday and I was like, I was struggling so much that I was like, okay, I'm going to come. I'll be faithful. I'm going to give. I'll be obedient. I'll pray. But I'm just going to hide. And that was the worst thing that I could have done.
What did you think that was inside you telling you to hide?
I don't know. I just think I was in such a difficult place. Just gone through so much pain and even some hurt, some things that happened along the way with ministry stuff, you know, and I was just hurting. And so it's like, I'm just gonna hide. I'm gonna be here because I need to be here, and I'm gonna give and pray and all those things, but I'm just gonna hide, and you know. And I remember one day I shared that with preacher, and he said, well, how'd that work out for you?
Yeah. By the way, Miss Joy is on staff and works here, plays piano for our worship team, and is killing it. So
well, I'm so grateful.
You're literally in the middle, on the middle of the stage.
I'm grateful the Lord did not allow me to hibernate like that. But that's the point. Like, I would say to them, don't. But we are made to need people.
Yeah.
We're made for community. We're created like that. So don't shut people out. Let people help you.
Uh-huh.
They want to help you. They don't know how. So help them know how. It's okay to let them know what you need, you know. But that really helped me. Doing things that feel normal helped me.
Yeah.
A lot of times we think, oh, because I don't have my husband anymore, I can't do this or that or whatever. And I'll never forget, this may sound kind of weird, but the first marriage retreat at our church, after my husband passed away. I was always involved in all the parts of it, the getting games and decorating and music and food and all this stuff. And our interim pastor came to me and he said, I don't want to offend you and I don't want to hurt you or in any way, but would you still want to be a part of this?
Yeah.
And the way I'm wired with ministry and all of that, like I wanted to, like the thought of staying home and just not being a part of it was a terrible thought. Yeah. So I actually went and helped, played the piano, helped with the food and the games and whatever. And yeah, so that sounds so weird. Yeah, I went to a marriage retreat by myself, but it felt normal to just be there and to be with those people. And so and that might not work for everybody, but for me, it was the best thing. But I think whatever it is for you, try to find things that feel normal. Like, okay, I can still be a part of this. I can still do this. I can still do normal things that bring joy to me.
Yeah.
And
imagine in doing those things that was normal, like it kind of spurs up the beautiful memories of you and your husband there. And as you talked about setting your mind on the good things.
Yeah.
What better way to do things that make you think of your favorite person and
right.
And to bring a little bit of closeness to them in this season of being away.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so helpful.
Yep. So, and I think remembering you're not the only one, because you feel like you are. You feel like you're the only one who's ever faced this kind of loss.
Yeah.
And you know better, but that's how you feel. So really remembering, everybody at some point, one side or the other, the husband or the wife is, are going to go through this, losing the other one.
Yeah.
And so just remembering that, I'm not the only one who has dealt with this, who is dealing with this. Other people have gotten through it beautifully, and it just kind of gives you hope, just remembering, like, okay, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
And then I think letting yourself cry, letting yourself have those moments of just crying out to God, going out in the backyard and, screaming and weeping and all whatever you need to do. It's okay. And God gave us that emotion, and it helps you. You have a good cry, you feel better,
It's like, oh, wow.
So sometimes we feel like we have to hold it all together and we have to be so
put together. And if you look at David and like in his Psalms, like what he writes, I mean, by the beginning of the Psalm, it's like, oh, does this guy hate God or something? Like you've forgotten me. And then at the end, he's like, but I praise your name. Yeah. And I even think, even in processing the grief, it leads you to God, right? Like it frees you, like it almost frees you to see clearly that He's still present.
And the last thing I had on this note was I would tell them to remember God isn't finished with you. He has a plan. It's up to us whether we're going to allow Him to work that plan to the fullest. But He's not finished. If you're still here, He still has a plan.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so thankful about your story. I think about my own personal relationship with my wife, and I pray that other people have this, is that like me and my wife are both committed to the mission of God. And because we're both committed to the mission of God, there are days when I don't want to be on mission, and she does, and she pulls me along. Mm-hmm. That's because her drive is not committed to mine. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm hopeful that if anything does happen, she will keep going or I will keep going. And that's why we are two people that become one, but two people that become one that are both surrendered to the cross. So our main focus isn't each other. It is loving each other as Christ loved us. Right. It's showing this beautiful picture of the gospel in our marriage. But our first priority is to extend His mission by partnering with Him as we share the gospel. And I just think purpose is a key to hope.
absolutely.
Because grief seems to suck hope out. I have nothing. Oh, I can't get this back. There's no, and the gospel says, you're much bigger than your relationships. You're much bigger than your career. You're much bigger than everything you can lose. There's something bigger. But even as we are on the mission for the very same thing that will reunite us, you're on mission for the very same being that will reunite you and your husband one day.
Yep.
That is just so beautiful to me. I'm so thankful. And I'm thankful that you just shared this story, and I'm thankful, and I really hope everybody listening can really learn from this. As we wrap up, I'd love it if you could talk about the ways in which God is using you in the ministry, the specific ministries that you have, your ministry and the ministry here at Temple, just so that people can know, like, God is still working.
So, about 4 months after my husband passed away, I was teaching piano. I was coaching volleyball, just doing, the things that I was kind of already doing those things previously. And really praying about, what do I do ministry? What's ministry going to look like? Other than, serving in my church and all of that. But as far as kind of vocationally, what's it going to look like? And the Lord put it on my heart to, my husband and I had a real burden for ministry families. He was kind of a pastor to pastors. He was very encouraging. He loved to help young pastors and loved to just be there for them when they needed encouragement and stuff. And so we had a burden for ministry families. There were just too many. We had seen too many casualties in the marriages, in the children. And we understood how it happens, because it can be a very tough road. Even though we love it and it's great, it can be very, very hard.
Well, there's the active enemy after us.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And it's just so unique. The things you deal with are just unique. It's a unique journey, So we had that burden. We were praying about, like, what we could do to try to help ministry families. And we were doing that as much as we could along the way. So the Lord kind of put it on my heart, well, that doesn't change. That hasn't changed just because Shane's gone. So why don't you try to help in the way that you can? So he really put it on my heart to start retreats for pastors' wives. Just times of encouragement, come and get refreshed, rest. We spoil them.
Yeah.
It's a Thursday to Saturday. And I called it the Hope Retreat. My husband always said, most of the time, all people need is a little bit of hope. And hope was kind of a theme that kind of ran through our ministry at our church for many years. And so called it the Hope Retreat, had the first retreat in Somerville, in our little town where I live and where he pastored. And never even knew if we'd have a second retreat, honestly. Like, just kind of, putting my toe in the water. And anyway, so started doing that. And now we're in January, we will have our 13th retreat. And I think we've been in 8 or 9 states. We try to take it around to accommodate people in different areas of the country.
Yeah. That's amazing.
The Lord also started opening doors for me to speak at churches, at ladies' events and stuff. So never saw that coming. Never would have wished for that. Terrifies me, really, honestly. But I told the Lord, I'll do whatever. However you can use this mess. However you can use this pain. I'll do it. And so I think churches started having me. My husband, he knew so many people. He just was a friend to so many people. He had spoken at a lot of places. And so I kind of had like, kind of riding his coattails, so to speak. People would have me come speak really because of, knowing him and our family's testimony, thankfully, and just our story, so a lot of all that put together, I think, is what kind of opened those doors for me. And so started a ministry called Only God Ministries. Only God was kind of the theme of our ministry. When we first went to our little town in Somerville, my husband began to pray. He said, we're going to pray that God will do things that only God could do. And so it kind of became the theme.
Yeah.
So, and we did. We saw him do incredible things. And so I named the ministry Only God Ministries. So it's the retreats, it's speaking at various different ladies' events. This last year, I did the first widows retreat, a retreat for widows. So that's another thing that maybe, might start doing more of those. And
California, Colorado, Alabama.
And then mentoring. I feel like, from all the years of being a pastor's wife, not that I know it all by any means, but I feel like there's ways that I can help
encourage
others in the ministry. And so there's that. I'll spend time with ladies. A lot of times it's over FaceTime because they're up in, wherever, live far away. So we have to do it that way. But so those are the parts really to the Only God Ministries. And then a little over a year ago, a job opportunity came open here at the church. And and I was praying. It's crazy because I had some job offers at some churches out of state. And I'd look at it and I mean, man, I love to work at a church. That, like, I've always worked at church, but as a pastor's wife, but I just didn't feel led to move away to any of those places. I knew God wanted me here at this church. And I was like, man, why can't an opportunity open up here? Like, I know this is where I'm supposed to be. And I just prayed, Lord, if you'd ever have an opportunity for me here, make it happen. I'm not going to go looking for it. I'm not going to drop any hints, anything. And he did. The Lord just opened the door. So I work as an administrative assistant and I assist 3 of the pastors.
You do a great job.
So
and you did amazing. I wish I was on your team. I'm just all alone. And I'm just thankful. Then, you know what? The thought that popped into my mind is, your husband's ministry was in Alabama, right? And how big was the church?
About between 600 and 700 is what it grew to. When we first went there, it was about 140, 150.
How big is the town?
The
town's 800. We have everybody but 100.
The town, so it used to be about 300 and something, and then they annexed some more land. So it grew to like 700 overnight.
You got the whole town.
Yeah,
that
but
is amazing.
It's amazing. People would drive from all over, and we had a radio program, and they would hear him. We got a lot of people came due to that. They'd hear him on the radio, and where's this church? And then they'd come, and so it was just incredible what we saw
happen.
God do there.
Well, and I just think from 700 in one location, your husband may have passed along, but his ministry is still going.
Yeah,
and he breathed life into you and led you, and you got to sit under his teaching, and now you're traveling all over the United States, teaching to women who are struggling. Teaching to men at your dining room table that are so thankful, and I'm just grateful that God's mission doesn't require breath in our lungs. He's gonna go, and he's gonna keep working, and he's gonna keep moving. And death. We already know that death can't stop God because he already rose from the dead.
Right.
And I'm just really thankful that of your faithfulness and your commitment to follow the Lord even when you don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's what you go.
Yeah, I was just going to share here at the end. My life verse has been Psalm 37:4 since I was a teenager. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. And it doesn't mean, of course, just God's going to give us whatever we want.
Yeah, I want a Ferrari. I want a Ferrari. I love the Lord.
But as we delight in him, no matter what circumstance comes, he puts the desire in our heart for the thing that he has for us. He puts the desire there and then meets it. And even through all this, I see that. Like, some people would look at it and be like, well, how can you, that verse isn't true in your life. You know, delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. I mean, I'm sure your desire was that your husband would live. Yes. But I have the understanding that it was God's time to take him. So that desire that I had did not match up with God's plan. And then he puts new desires in your heart and then meets them. And it's just a beautiful thing when you stay surrendered and truly delight in the Lord and allow him to put those desires in your heart.